The morning mist clung to the Ashwood pack grounds like a burial shroud. Rhiannon pressed her back against the cold stone wall of the healer's cottage, counting her breaths the way Grandmother Morgan had taught her. 1, 2, 3, hold, release. 3 years had passed since her 18th birthday. 3 years since the night that should have brought her wolf, brought her pride, brought her place in the world. Instead, it had brought only fire in her veins and the sound of her own screaming. While others her age ran free through the forest, their wolves magnificent and sure, Rhiannon remained trapped between forms. Neither fully human nor completely wolf, still hiding in shadows. The herbs in her basket smelled of mountain sage and winter mint. She'd risen before dawn to gather them before the pack stirred, before she had to face the eyes that looked through her like she was already a ghost. The healer, old Moira, was the only one who didn't flinch when Rhiannon entered a room. The only one who let her touch the sacred work of mending, of healing, of mattering. Little mouse, the voice made her stomach clench. Hiding again, Ronan blocked the doorway with his broad frame, 25 years of muscle and meanness wrapped in enforcer's authority. Behind him, the twins materialized like matching nightmares. Celine with her ice chip eyes and Declan with his cruel mouth already curving into a smile. I'm working. Rhiannon kept her voice steady, her hands careful on the basket. Inside, the herbs were crushed from where she'd gripped too hard. Moira needs these for the fever that's spreading through the Omega quarters. Working, Ronan repeated the word like it was something foul. He stepped closer, tracking mud across the floor she'd scrubbed clean at dawn. Is that what we're calling it when the pack's broken Omega plays at being useful? The twins laughed. They always laughed. It was their gift, making cruelty sound like music. Celine examined her perfect nails, each one filed to a point sharp enough to draw blood. Did you hear Ronan? Father says the Alpha King's convoy will pass through our territory next week. Every unmated wolf of age will need to look their absolute best. She paused, her smile widening like a wound. Well, every proper wolf. The words hit exactly where they were meant to. Rhiannon's hand stilled on her basket. The Alpha King, Kale Darkmoon. They called him the youngest wolf to ever unite the Northern Territories. So powerful that even alphas bowed in his presence. Rumors said he could shift into a wolf larger than any seen in 3 generations. That his howl could shake mountains. That he'd never lost a challenge. That he'd never taken a mate. Imagine, Declan added, his voice thick with false sympathy, having to explain to the Alpha King why our pack harbors a defective Omega. Father will probably lock you in the cellar during his visit. Can't have royalty thinking we're weak. Grandmother Morgan had told her once that the strongest steel was forged in the hottest flames, but Rhiannon didn't feel strong. She felt brittle. Glass that had been heated and cooled too many times, ready to shatter at the slightest pressure. Please, the word came out smaller than she wanted. I have work to finish. Ronan grabbed the basket from her hands. He held it up, examining the crushed herbs with exaggerated interest. You missed some dirt on these. He opened his fingers. The basket fell. Herbs scattered across the stone floor like broken promises. The clay pot Moira had given her, the one painted with healing symbols, shattered into pieces too small to mend. Clumsy Omega, Celine tutted. Now you'll have to explain to Moira why you're destroying her supplies. Again. They left her kneeling among the ruins. Their laughter echoed down the corridor, fading into the sounds of the pack waking. Breakfast. Training. The daily rituals of wolves who belonged. Rhiannon gathered the pieces with trembling hands. A shard of pottery sliced her palm. She watched the blood well up bright red against her pale skin. Even her blood was wrong. Too bright, too thin, lacking the darker richness that flowed through proper wolves. Child. The voice was soft as winter snow. Morgan stood in the doorway, 87 years of survival, wrapped in a body that seemed too frail to contain it. She moved with the careful grace of someone who'd learned to make every movement count, every breath deliberate. Rhiannon's grandmother had been ancient for as long as memory held. Silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with hands that shook when she lifted her tea, but never when she mixed her medicines. The pack thought her harmless, weak, a relic from another time kept alive only by Rhiannon's devoted care. They were fools. Let me see. Morgan took Rhiannon's bleeding hand in her weathered ones. She produced a cloth from her pocket. She always had exactly what was needed, and wrapped the wound with practiced efficiency. It wasn't your fault. It never is. Rhiannon couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. But the basket is still broken. The herbs are still ruined, and I'm still alive. Morgan's grip tightened on her hand. You're still alive, child. That is no small thing. The old woman helped her to her feet, then bent with surprising suppleness to collect the scattered herbs. Her movements were careful, deliberate, but there was something underneath. A strength that didn't match the trembling hands, the stooped shoulders, the image of frailty she presented to the world. Rhiannon had noticed these contradictions her whole life. How grandmother could claim exhaustion, yet never truly sleep. How she could appear confused, yet always knew exactly where every object in her cottage sat. How she could seem to forget names, yet remember stories from 70 years past with perfect clarity. Come. Morgan's voice was suddenly urgent. We haven't much time. Time for what? The Alpha King arrives tonight, Rhiannon's pulse quickened. Tonight, but Declan said next week. The twins know nothing. Morgan pulled her toward the small cottage they shared at the pack's edge. It was barely more than a garden shed, but it was theirs. Private, safe. Your father received word this morning. The king travels in secret, seeking something he believes was lost long ago. Inside the cottage, Morgan moved to the hearth. Her hands suddenly steady, pushed aside a loose stone in the chimney. From the hidden space, she withdrew a small wooden box carved with symbols that seemed to shift in the firelight. Grandmother, what? Hush. The old woman's voice carried an authority that made Rhiannon's questions die unspoken. What I'm about to tell you, what I'm about to give you, changes everything. But you must choose, child. You must choose whether to remain safe in your suffering or step into a truth that will shake the foundations of everything you know. Rhiannon's chest tightened. I don't understand. Morgan opened the box. Inside, nestled in velvet that had once been blue, lay a crystal vial filled with liquid that seemed to hold moonlight. Next to it, a letter written in handwriting Rhiannon knew as well as her own, her mother's hand. Your mother, Morgan began, her ancient eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears, was the strongest woman I ever knew, stronger than me, stronger than the pack ever suspected, and she loved you more than she loved breathing. She died of shame. The words came out flat. Dead, it's what the pack whispered, what they'd always whispered. She knew I would be defective. The sickness that took her was grief. No. Morgan's voice cracked like breaking ice. She died of love, of sacrifice, of a choice she made every single day for 6 years, knowing it would kill her because it was the only way to save you. The room spun. Rhiannon gripped the table's edge, feeling the wood grain beneath her palms. Real, solid, anchor. Tell me. Morgan's hands shook now, not the performative trembling she showed the pack, but real tremors. Age and memory and grief made visible. Your mother was moon-blessed. The words hung in the air like smoke. Moon-blessed, the ancient bloodline. The wolves who could walk on moonlight, see through deception, command power that made alphas kneel. The bloodline that had been hunted to extinction 3 generations ago. The bloodline that was supposed to be extinct. That's impossible, Rhiannon whispered. The Council of Alphas ordered them all killed. Yes. Morgan's voice was bitter as winter ash. 65 years ago, when I was 22 years old, they voted. 7 alphas sitting in judgment, deciding that moon-blessed wolves were too powerful to be allowed to live, too dangerous, too likely to challenge their authority. She moved to the window, looking out at the pack grounds where wolves were beginning their day. Morning training, kitchen duties, the comfortable hierarchy of predator and prey, strong and weak, wolf and omega. They hunted us like animals, burned our homes, killed our children. I watched them murder my sisters, my cousins, my friends. I watched them kill my mate, your grandfather, simply because he dared love me. Rhiannon's breath caught. She'd never known her grandfather. Grandmother had always said he died young before her daughter was born. But there was more to that story. There was always more. I survived, Morgan continued, because I learned to hide. I suppressed my wolf so completely that even I almost forgot what I was. I became small, weak, harmless, the kind of old woman no one looks at twice. She turned back to Rhiannon, and in the firelight, her eyes flashed gold, just for a moment, just long enough. I raised your mother in that smallness, teaching her to hide what she was, to never shift in front of others, to pretend her wolf was weak, unremarkable, human almost. But mother could shift, Rhiannon said. I remember, when I was little before she got sick. Her wolf was beautiful, silver as starlight. She could shift because I taught her control. Morgan's voice softened. Moon-blessed wolves are different, child. Our first shift doesn't come at 18 like normal wolves. It comes earlier, harder, more dangerous. Your mother shifted at 15. The power nearly killed her. I spent 3 years teaching her to contain it, to make it look ordinary. The old woman moved back to the table, lifting the vial with reverent hands. When your mother met your father, she was 32, old for an unmated wolf. Aldrich was 15, young, weak, controllable. Perfect cover. She bound her wolf even tighter, made herself seem unremarkable. They mated when he came of age. She had you, and for a while we thought perhaps the bloodline had thinned enough. Perhaps you would be normal. Safe. Rhiannon's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach where the memory of fire still lived. Her 18th birthday, the shift that wouldn't come. The agony of bones trying to break and reform, but finding no pattern, no path, no completion. But I'm not normal, she whispered. I can't shift at all. My wolf is broken. Your wolf is bound. Morgan set the vial down with careful precision. When you were born, I knew. The moment I held you, I felt the power radiating from your tiny body. You were going to be stronger than your mother. Stronger than me. Strong enough that you wouldn't be able to hide. She opened the letter, her mother's handwriting blurring through Rhiannon's tears before she could read a word. Your mother saw it too. And she knew what it meant. The council's laws hadn't changed. Moon-blessed wolves were still meant to die. So she made a choice. Morgan's voice broke. She performed a binding ritual. Ancient magic. Blood magic. It required her to pour her own life force into you day by day, year by year, creating a suppression so complete that your wolf couldn't emerge at all. That's why she got weaker, Rhiannon breathed. The pieces were falling into place like a puzzle made of pain. Why she couldn't heal. Why she faded. She chose to fade. Morgan wiped her eyes with shaking hands. Every morning she woke up, she chose you over herself. For 6 years. Until her body couldn't sustain the binding anymore. Until she'd given every drop of her strength to keep you safe. The cottage felt too small suddenly. Too close. Rhiannon stood paced to the window, pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Outside, the pack moved through its rituals. Ronan was training younger wolves, demonstrating a takedown with casual brutality. Celine and Declan walked arm in arm toward the main house, probably to report on their morning's cruelty. Her father stood on the main house steps, watching the eastern road. Waiting. Why didn't you tell me? Rhiannon's voice was raw. Why let me think I was broken, defective? Why let me suffer, Deed? Because the binding required your belief. Morgan stood beside her, their reflections overlapping in the glass. Old and young, past and future. If you'd known you had a wolf, you would have tried to reach for it. And trying would have shattered the suppression before you were ready, before you were strong enough to survive what comes next. What comes next? Morgan handed her the vial. The Alpha King comes tonight. He's been searching for 5 years for any sign of moon-blessed survival. And when he sees you, when he's near you, the binding will break. How do you know? The old woman's smile was sad and knowing. Because there's only one thing powerful enough to shatter a mother's dying wish. Only one force that supersedes blood magic itself. What? True mates. The vial slipped through Rhiannon's fingers. Morgan caught it with reflexes that belied her age, setting it safely on the table. That's impossible, Rhiannon said. Fated mates are rare, and an Alpha King, he would never. I'm nobody. I'm less than nobody. I'm broken. You were never broken. Morgan's hands cupped her face with infinite gentleness. You were hidden, protected, kept safe until the one person who could free you arrived. Your mother saw him in her visions before she died. She knew he would come for you. She knew that when he touched you, when the mate bond recognized itself, nothing would be able to hold your wolf anymore. Rhiannon pulled away, her mind reeling. Fated mate, true mate. The bond that transcended pack law, that made 2 wolves into one soul across 2 bodies. She'd heard the stories, dreamed the dreams, but those were for other people, for whole people, for wolves who deserved happy endings. I can't, she whispered. Grandmother, I can't. What if you're wrong? What if the binding breaks and my wolf is still malformed? What if I shift and I'm magnificent? Morgan's voice rang with certainty. You will be magnificent, child, just like your mother, just like me before I learned to hide. A commotion outside made them both turn. Horses, the thunder of hooves on packed earth, shouts of alarm and excitement mingling into chaos. He's early, Morgan breathed. The king is early. Rhiannon's pulse hammered against her ribs. She could feel something building beneath her skin. A pressure, a presence, her wolf stirring for the first time in 3 years. Not in agony, not in failure, in recognition. Drink this. Morgan pressed the vial into her hands. It won't suppress your wolf anymore. The binding is already fracturing, but it will give you clarity. Control. When you shift tonight, you'll need both. Tonight, grandmother, I can't shift in front of the entire pack. They'll kill me. They'll kneel. The old woman's eyes flashed gold again, longer this time. Or they'll die trying to stand. Now drink. Quickly. Rhiannon's hands shook as she uncorked the vial. The liquid tasted of moonlight and memory. Her mother's love made tangible. It coated her throat with tingling warmth spreading through her chest, her limbs settling into her bones like coming home. There's more you need to know, Morgan said urgently. The Alpha King isn't just looking for Moonblessed. He's looking for a specific bloodline. The prophecy speaks of a knock on the door, sharp, authoritative. Rhiannon Ashwood, Beta Magnus's voice carried through the thin wood. Your presence is required at the main house. Alpha's orders. All unmated wolves are to be presented within the hour. Morgan gripped her hand. Remember, child, when you feel the bond, don't fight it. Let it break the chains your mother wrapped around you with love. Let yourself be free. What about you? Rhiannon asked. If they know about me, they'll know about you. The old woman smiled, and for the first time in Rhiannon's memory, she stood straight, tall. Her trembling stopped. Her eyes blazed. For one perfect moment, Morgan looked like what she truly was. A warrior, a survivor, a wolf who had bent but never broken. Let them know, she said. I'm tired of hiding. And if the Alpha King is who I think he is, if the prophecy is finally coming true, then it's time for all of us to stop being afraid. The main house had been transformed. Banners hung from the rafters, Ashwood's brown and gold mingling with colors Rhiannon didn't recognize. Midnight blue, silver. The dark moon pack colors. Unmated wolves crowded the great hall, primped and preened and desperate. Females in their finest dresses. Males with freshly groomed coats in practiced dominance displays. The air thrummed with nervous energy, with hope and hunger, and the primal need to be chosen. Rhiannon stood at the very back, trying to be invisible. It was a skill she'd perfected over 3 years. How to take up no space. How to make her presence so small that eyes slid past her like water over stone. But tonight something was different. Tonight, no matter how still she stood, wolves kept glancing her way. Frowning, confused by something they couldn't name but could sense. A disturbance in the familiar order of things. Form ranks, Beta Magnus's voice cut through the chatter. He was a mountain of scarred muscle, his left eye milky from a challenge gone wrong. Alphas and betas in front, deltas and gammas in the middle, omegas in the back. Rhiannon took her place in the last row. Alone. The pack had few omegas, and most of those were mated, their status secured by usefulness, if not by strength. Only Rhiannon remained unmated, too defective even to be traded away in an alliance agreement. A girl from a visiting pack stood near her, young and pretty, with the bright eyes of someone still innocent of real cruelty. She glanced at Rhiannon and started to speak, then seemed to think better of it. Her nose wrinkled slightly. Disgust. Pity. The familiar cocktail of emotions that followed Rhiannon like a shadow. The Alpha King approaches. The massive oak doors swung open, and the world changed. Power rolled in like a physical force. It pressed against Rhiannon's skin, stealing the air from her lungs, making her wolf surge forward with a violence that would have brought her to her knees if her body hadn't locked completely. Wolves began dropping, one by one, then in waves, unable to withstand the sheer dominance radiating from the doorway. Alphas struggled to remain standing. Betas submitted with whimpers. The visiting girl beside Rhiannon fell to her knees, head bowed, trembling. But Rhiannon remained standing, not from defiance, not from strength. Her body had frozen, every muscle locked, because something deep inside her had awakened. Something that had been sleeping for 21 years, wrapped in her mother's dying love, was opening its eyes. Her wolf whispered, or maybe screamed. She couldn't tell through the roaring in her ears. Mine, mine, mine. Kale Darkmoon entered the hall, and reality bent around him. He was taller than any wolf she'd ever seen. Broader. He moved like violence contained, like a storm choosing not to break, like controlled power given form and purpose. His hair was black as a moonless night, his skin bronzed despite the northern cold. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Silver, like liquid mercury, ancient despite his 26 years. Holding secrets and power and a loneliness so vast it had its own gravity. Those eyes swept across the gathered wolves with dismissive efficiency. Cataloging, searching, dismissing. He was looking for something specific, and these preening, desperate wolves were not it. Then his gaze found her. The world narrowed, sound disappeared, time became meaningless. There was only this moment, this connection, this recognition that reached deeper than blood, deeper than bone, into the very essence of what made them alive. He took a step toward her, then another. The crowd parted before him like water before a blade. Your Majesty. Her father's voice shattered the silence. Aldrich bowed low, his face pale, his hands trembling. Welcome to Ashwood. We are honored by your presence. May I present our unmated wolves for your consideration? Kale didn't look away from Rhiannon, didn't acknowledge the alpha's greeting, didn't seem to hear anything except whatever song was playing between them, inaudible to everyone else. Who is that? His voice was deeper than thunder, soft as silk. It slithered down Rhiannon's spine like a caress, like a promise, like a threat. Who, your Majesty? Aldrich followed his gaze and his face went from pale to gray. Oh, that's no one of consequence. An Omega, a defective one. We've arranged our strongest females in the front if you would just, her name. It wasn't a request. Aldrich flinched as if struck. Rhiannon, my daughter, your Majesty, but I assure you she is not suitable for Rhiannon. The way Kale said her name made her knees weak, made her wolf throw itself against the binding with renewed desperation, made every nerve in her body light up like she'd touched lightning. Come here. Her feet moved without permission. One step. Two. The crowd parted for her just as it had for him, but with disgust instead of fear. She could feel their eyes, hear their whispers. The broken Omega, the defective one. What could the Alpha King possibly want with her? She stopped 3 feet away from him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to smell pine and winter storms and something wild that made her wolf keen with desperate wanting. This close she could see the scars, fine lines decorating his neck, his hands, his forearms where his sleeves were rolled back, evidence of battles won, challenges conquered, a lifetime of violence written on skin that should have been too young to carry such history. Your wolf, his voice dropped lower, meant only for her ears. Show me. The blood drained from her face. I can't. Can't or won't. Your Majesty. Aldrich's desperation was palpable now. He stepped forward, hands raised in placation. She's defective. Her wolf is malformed. To ask you to witness such a display would be an insult to... Kale moved so fast Rhiannon didn't see it. One moment her father was speaking. The next he was on his knees, the Alpha King's hand around his throat. Not squeezing, not hurting, but the threat was clear as crystal. Did I ask for your opinion? Aldrich's face purpled. Around them the Ashwood wolves growled instinct, demanding they protect their alpha. But none dared move. The power differential was too great. Moving against Kale would be suicide. Please, the word came out of Rhiannon's mouth before she could stop it. Please don't hurt him. Kale turned those mercury eyes back to her. Something flickered in their depths. Surprise. Interest. Something almost like approval. Slowly he released Aldrich, who gasped and stumbled backward. You beg for a man who calls you defective. The Alpha King tilted his head with predatory curiosity. Interesting. He's my father. Biology doesn't make family. There was something in his tone that suggested personal experience with that particular truth. It only makes blood relations. Family is something else entirely. He lifted his hand toward her face. Rhiannon flinched, expecting a blow. She couldn't help it. 3 years of being hit, pushed, slapped had trained her body to expect violence from any raised hand. But he didn't strike her. His fingers ghosted across her cheek, barely a whisper of touch, and electricity exploded through her veins. The binding her mother had woven with dying breaths shattered like glass. Her wolf surged forward with a roar that was part triumph, part fury, part desperate joy at finally being allowed to exist. Rhiannon's spine arched. Pain ripped through her body as bones began to break and reform. But this time the pain had purpose. Direction. Her body knew what it was supposed to become. No, she gasped, trying to pull away, trying to stop the shift. Not here. Not in front of everyone. They would kill her. They would... Don't fight it. Kale's hand moved to the back of her neck, steadying her. His touch was fire and ice, and coming home all at once. I've got you. Let it happen. They'll see, she whimpered. They'll know what I am. They'll kneel. His voice carried absolute certainty. Or they'll die. Now let your wolf free Rhiannon. She's waited long enough. The shift took her like a tidal wave. Her vision exploded into colors she'd never seen before. Sounds crescendoed into symphony. The world expanded until she could sense every heartbeat in the room, every breath, every thought written in scent and stance, and the subtle language of fear. She was aware of gasps, of someone screaming, of her father's voice raised in shock or horror or both. but mostly she was aware of the wolf standing before her. Kale had shifted too. His wolf was massive, black as midnight, with eyes that burned silver fire, and he was doing something impossible. The Alpha King Terror of the Northern Territories, undefeated in 100 challenges, was on his belly before her. Neck exposed, head bowed, in absolute complete submission. Beautiful. His voice echoed in her mind through a connection that shouldn't exist yet, not without a mating mark. My beautiful, impossible mate. Rhiannon looked down at herself and understood why he called her impossible. Her wolf form wasn't like any she'd ever seen. She was larger than she should be, her fur not quite fur, but something crystalline that caught the torchlight and threw it back in rainbow fractals. When she moved, she left faint silver footprints that glowed before fading. The room had gone silent. Every wolf stood frozen, staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to terror to something that looked like recognition. Moon-blessed, someone whispered. Then louder. She's moon-blessed. Impossible. Aldrich breathed. The bloodline is extinct. It has to be extinct. Clearly not. A new voice cut through the chaos. Morgan stood in the doorway, no longer stooped, no longer trembling. She stood tall and sturdy, her eyes blazing with power that had been hidden for 65 years. The bloodline survives, and you should all be on your knees. The old woman shifted. Her wolf was smaller than Rhiannon's, touched with silver in age, but unmistakably the same crystalline quality. Two moon-blessed wolves, grandmother and granddaughter, standing side by side in a pack that had thought them extinct. Two Kale's beta, a grizzled warrior named Magnus, murmured from near the door. There are two of them. There are more, Morgan said, her mental voice carrying to everyone in the room. Hidden, protected, waiting. And now that my granddaughter has awakened, they'll begin to wake as well. The time of hiding is over. Celine made a sound like a wounded animal. This can't be happening. She's nothing. She's nobody. She's your future queen, Kale said. He'd shifted back to human form, standing naked and unashamed in the center of the hall. Someone threw him a cloak, which he wrapped around his waist with careless grace. His eyes never left Rhiannon. And you will address her with the respect that title demands, or I will remove your tongue and feed it to you. Rhiannon shifted back and immediately missed the clarity of her wolf's senses. Being human felt limiting now, confining. Someone draped a blanket over her shoulders, and she clutched it gratefully, suddenly aware of her nakedness and vulnerability. Your Majesty, Aldrich tried again, his voice shaking. Surely you can't mean to she's untrained, unknown. We don't know what she's capable of. I know exactly what she's capable of. Kale moved to stand beside Rhiannon, his presence a shield between her and the pack that had tormented her for 3 years. She's capable of surviving 21 years of abuse while carrying power that could level this entire pack. She's capable of begging for mercy for a father who called her defective. She's capable of standing when my dominance drops every other wolf to their knees. He turned to address the entire hall, his voice ringing with authority that made even the walls seem to lean in to listen. Rhiannon Moon-blessed of Ashwood is my fated mate, my equal, my chosen queen. Any who challenge this will face me in single combat. Any who threaten her will face the full weight of Darkmoon's armies. Any who touch her without permission will lose the hand that dared. Silence, complete and total. Even the torches seemed to stop crackling. Then Morgan laughed. It was a sound like silver bells, like breaking glass, like freedom after 65 years of captivity. Well said, King Kale, well said indeed. She moved to stand with them, 3 generations of power finally allowed to stand tall. But there's more you all should know. The Council of Alphas will want her dead. They'll want us both dead. And when they discover that the Moon-blessed bloodline has survived, they'll come with armies to finish what they started 65 years ago. Let them come, Kale said. His hand found Rhiannon's, their fingers interlacing with a rightness that made her breath catch. They'll find the North united, and they'll find that moon-blessed wolves are not so easy to kill when they have a kingdom to protect them. Rhiannon looked at their joined hands, at her grandmother standing proud and unafraid for the first time in her life, at her father pale and shaking, but with something in his eyes that might have been the beginning of understanding, at the pack that had tormented her now kneeling in submission or fear or both. I renounce my ties to Ashwood, she said. The words came from somewhere deep inside, from her wolf, from her mother's spirit, from the strength she'd never known she possessed. I reject the pack that rejected me. I choose Darkmoon. I choose my mate. I choose to be free. The formal words of renunciation hung in the air. Once spoken, they couldn't be taken back. She was no longer Ashwood, no longer her father's shame, No longer the broken Omega they'd tried to grind into dust. Rhiannon, Aldrich's voice cracked. He took a step forward, then seemed to think better of it when Kale growled low in his chest. Please, let me explain. Let me tell you why. Not tonight, Morgan said, and there was steel beneath the kindness in her voice. Tonight we leave. What you have to say, Aldrich, you can say tomorrow if we decide to listen, or you can carry it to your grave. The choice is yours. She turned to Kyle. We'll need to move quickly. The power surge from her awakening will have been felt by every sensitive wolf within 100 miles. The council will know by morning that a moon blessed has emerged. My convoy is ready, Kale said. We ride within the hour. I need to get my things, Rhiannon began, but Morgan shook her head. There's nothing in that cottage worth going back for. Nothing but memories of hiding. Let them burn with the rest of it. Rhiannon thought of the small room under the stairs where she'd slept for 21 years. The narrow bed, the single window that looked out at nothing, the walls that had contained her smallness. Morgan was right. There was nothing there she needed. Wait, a voice called out. Celine stepped forward and, for once, her perfect face showed genuine emotion. Fear. You can't just leave. You can't just... Father said you'd be hidden during the visit. He said you weren't supposed to be seen. This wasn't supposed to happen. And yet it did, Rhiannon said. She met the girl's eyes steadily, no longer the mouse who flinched and hid. Did you enjoy it, Celine? The 3 years of making my life hell. The little cruelties. The casual violence. Celine's face paled. You were Omega. You were nothing, Rhiannon finished. Broken defective. Yes, I heard. Everyone made sure I heard. But I wasn't any of those things. I was hidden. I was protected. I was the moon-blessed daughter of a moon-blessed mother, and you were too blind with your own petty power to see it. She took a step toward the girl who'd tormented her and was grimly satisfied to see Celine flinch back. But I want to thank you, Rhiannon continued. You and Ronan and Declan and everyone who made me feel worthless, because you taught me something important. What? Celine whispered. That cruelty says more about the person inflicting it than the person receiving it. That real strength is enduring. That surviving is its own form of victory. She turned away, dismissing Celine as easily as the girl had always dismissed her. Enjoy your life here, Celine. I hope you never learn what it's like to be on the receiving end of the treatment you gave so freely. Outside, horses waited. Dark Moon wolves and their dozens warriors, all with eyes that assessed and accepted. They looked at Rhiannon with respect, with curiosity, with the kind of acknowledgement she'd never received in her own pack. Kale helped her mount his hands, steadying her with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence she knew he was capable of. Morgan climbed onto her own horse with the ease of someone who'd done this before, who'd fled in the night before, who knew the weight of leaving everything behind. As they prepared to ride out, Aldrich appeared in the doorway. He looked old suddenly, older than his 55 years, broken in a way that had nothing to do with wolves and everything to do with fathers who failed their children. Rhiannon, he called, please, just tell me, did your mother suffer? At the end, she could have lied, could have been kind, could have given him the comfort he didn't deserve. But he'd taught her to be honest through his own painful honesty. He'd shown her what happened when you let guilt eat you alive from the inside. Yes, she said simply. Every day for 6 years she suffered. Every morning she woke up and chose to die a little more so that I could live. And every day you let her do it alone because you couldn't bear to look at what her sacrifice was creating. His face crumpled. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what she was doing. She never told me. She told you enough, Morgan said from her horse. She told you she was binding Rhiannon's wolf. She told you it would cost her. You chose not to ask questions because you didn't want to know the answers. That's not the same as ignorance, Aldrich. That's cowardice. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Rhiannon looked at her father, really looked at him perhaps for the first time in years. She saw a man haunted by choices he couldn't unmake, drowning in guilt he couldn't wash away, living in a grief so profound it had poisoned everything he touched. She could hate him. She had every right to hate him. But hate was just another cage, and she'd spent enough of her life locked up. I forgive you, she said. The words surprised her as much as they surprised him. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be free of the anger. We were both grieving, Mother. We just grieved differently. Rhiannon, goodbye, Father. Kale signaled and the convoy moved. Horses carried them away from Ashwood, away from 3 years of torment, away from the only home Rhiannon had ever known. She didn't look back. There was nothing behind her worth seeing. Instead, she looked forward, at the road stretching into darkness, at the man riding beside her who'd recognized her when she'd been invisible to everyone else, at the grandmother who'd hidden her true nature for 65 years just to survive long enough to see this moment, at the future opening before her like a door that had been locked her whole life. "Are you frightened?" Kale asked after they'd ridden in silence for an hour. Rhiannon considered the question. She was leaving everything she knew, riding toward a life she couldn't imagine, about to face a council that wanted her dead simply for existing. "No," she said, and realized it was true. "For the first time in 3 years, I'm not frightened at all." He smiled. It transformed his face from intimidating to beautiful. "Good. Because what comes next will require courage. The council will demand you appear before them. They'll want to verify what you are. And when they see you, when they see your grandmother, they'll remember why they tried to exterminate Moonblessed in the first place. Because we're powerful. Because you're just," Morgan said from behind them. "Moonblessed wolves can see truth. Can't be deceived, can't be manipulated. The council maintains power through lies and fear and carefully constructed hierarchies. What do you think happens when wolves who can see through all of it emerge?" "Revolution," Rhiannon said softly. "Exactly." The old woman's eyes gleamed in the moonlight. "They killed us not because we were strong, but because we were honest. And honesty is the most dangerous weapon of all." They rode through the night, putting miles between them and Ashwood, and high above the moon watched their flight, full and bright and somehow approving. Rhiannon tilted her face toward that silver light and felt her wolf stir again. Not in pain this time, not in desperate clawing need, just in quiet acknowledgement, recognition between moon and moon-blessed. "Thank you," she whispered to the sky, to her mother's spirit, to the goddess who'd crafted her bloodline from moonlight and stubbornness. The moon didn't answer, but somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, then another, and another. A chorus rising to meet the night, new voices joining the song, other moon-blessed, hidden and suppressed and bound, beginning to wake up, beginning to remember what they were, beginning to come home. And in a cottage at the edge of Ashwood territory, in a room barely bigger than a closet, a single candle burned. The flame danced in a wind that came from nowhere, throwing shadows that looked almost like a woman's silhouette. If someone had been watching, they might have sworn they heard a voice. Freya's voice. "Be free, my darling. Be strong. Be everything I couldn't let you be. The moon is rising and you're finally going home." The candle guttered, the shadows faded, and the small room that had contained so much suffering was finally mercifully empty. The broken Omega was gone. The moon-blessed queen was coming, and the world would never be the same. The journey to Dark Moon territory took 3 days. 3 days of riding through forests that grew darker and wilder the further north they traveled. 3 days of learning what it meant to be treated with dignity instead of disgust. The Dark Moon wolves rode in formation around them, protective without being suffocating. They nodded to Rhiannon when she passed, asked if she needed water, food, rest. Spoke to her like she was a person instead of a problem. It was disorienting, like learning a new language after being mute for years. Kale rode beside her most of the way, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence, but careful not to crowd her. He seemed to understand that she needed space to process everything that had shattered and rebuilt itself in the span of a single night. But on the second evening, when they made camp in a clearing beside a stream that ran silver in the moonlight, he finally broke the comfortable silence between them. "Tell me about your mother." Rhiannon looked up from the fire she'd been staring into. Kale sat across from her, his face half in shadow, half in flickering light, dangerous and beautiful in equal measure. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "What she liked, what made her laugh, what she dreamed about before she chose to die for you." The bluntness of his words should have hurt. Instead, they were a relief. No one else had been willing to say it out loud, to acknowledge what Freya had done. "She loved gardens," Rhiannon said softly. "Even when she got too weak to tend them herself, she'd sit on the porch and tell me which herbs to plant where. She said plants were honest. They either grew or they didn't. No pretending, no politics." A smile tugged at Kale's mouth. "She sounds wise." She was. Rhiannon pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "She used to tell me stories about the old times, before the council, when moon-blessed wolves walked freely and no one was afraid. I thought they were just fairy tales, things she made up to help me sleep." "They weren't fairy tales," Morgan said from behind them. The old woman settled onto a log with the grace of someone far younger. In the 2 days since leaving Ashwood, she'd stopped pretending to be frail. Her movements were sure now, confident, A warrior no longer hiding behind age. Every story your mother told you was real. The Moon-Blessed did walk freely once. We were healers, counselors, the conscience of the wolf world. What happened? Rhiannon asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The same thing that always happens when truth threatens power. Morgan's voice was bitter as winter ash. The alphas grew tired of being held accountable, tired of having their lies exposed, tired of wolves who couldn't be manipulated or controlled. So they declared us dangerous, called us a threat to pack stability, and they hunted us like animals. She stared into the fire, her eyes reflecting flames that looked older than the one burning before them. I was 22 when it started, mated to a human man named Thomas. A human, Rhiannon's eyes widened. Moon-blessed bonds are different, Morgan said softly. We can mate across species lines. Thomas was a blacksmith, strong hands, gentle heart, eyes that saw me for who I truly was. Her voice grew tender. He had this habit of humming while he worked, old songs from his childhood. And when he smiled, she paused, lost in memory. When he smiled, it felt like the sun breaking through winter clouds. Rhiannon had never heard her grandmother speak this way, never heard that softness, that ache of love remembered. I just discovered I was carrying Freya when the council came, Morgan continued. Thomas made me promise right there as our village burned that I would run, that I would save our daughter even if it meant leaving him behind. Her hands clenched. He put his hand on my belly and said, run, give her a life, make it worth it. And then he stood between me and Dorian's blade. Tears slid down her weathered cheeks. I ran, like he asked, like he begged, and I heard him die while I fled into the forest, heard his last breath, felt the moment our bond severed. She looked up, meeting Rhiannon's eyes. I've lived 65 years past that moment. 65 years of pretending to be weak so Dorian wouldn't know I survived. 65 years of making Thomas's death worth something. Kale's jaw tightened. The council will answer for this. Every alpha who participated. Every wolf who carried out their orders. Careful, Your Majesty, Morgan said, though her tone was approving. Vengeance and justice look very similar until you're standing in the middle of them. Then call it justice. His silver eyes blazed in the firelight. I've been searching for Moon-blessed survivors for 5 years. Do you know why? Rhiannon shook her head. Because my grandmother was Moon-blessed. The words fell like stones into still water. She died when I was 8, murdered by an alpha who feared what she might reveal about his corruption. My father watched it happen and did nothing. Absolutely nothing. The bitterness in his voice was profound. Old. The kind of wound that never quite healed. He wasn't always mad, Kale continued. The father I remember from childhood was good, kind. But watching his mother die, knowing he was too weak to stop it, it broke something inside him. He started seeing enemies everywhere, threats in every shadow. By the time I was 13, he'd killed half our pack in his paranoia. So you killed him, Rhiannon said quietly. I challenged him. It's different. But the haunted look in his eyes said it wasn't different at all. Not really. I was 13 years old and I ripped out my own father's throat in front of the entire pack. And you want to know the worst part? She waited. I felt relieved, not sad, not guilty, just relieved that it was finally over. He stood abruptly, pacing to the edge of the firelight. The council used it against me for years, called me unstable, dangerous, a patricide who couldn't be trusted with power. It didn't matter that I'd saved my pack. It didn't matter that he'd been murdering innocent wolves. All that mattered was that I'd broken the sacred law. A son doesn't kill his father, ever. Rhiannon rose and moved to stand beside him. She didn't touch him, didn't offer empty platitudes, just stood in solidarity with someone else who understood what it meant to carry guilt for surviving. You and I, she said softly, we're both here because our parents made terrible choices. Your father chose madness over healing. My mother chose death over my freedom. We didn't ask for these legacies, but here we are carrying them anyway. He turned to look at her, and something in his expression cracked open. Not breaking, just revealing what lay beneath the armor of authority and power. Here we are, he echoed. They stood like that for a long moment, two people shaped by tragedy finding unexpected understanding in each other's damage. The council won't see it that way, Morgan said from behind them. They'll see two threats, a patricidal king and a moon-blessed Omega. They'll try to destroy you both. Let them try. Kale's hand found Rhiannon's, their fingers interlacing with that same rightness she'd felt in Ashwood. I didn't spend 5 years searching for Moonblessed just to let the council murder them again. Why did you search? Rhiannon asked. If you knew it was dangerous, if you knew the council would, because my grandmother made me promise. His voice went soft. Right before she died, she made me swear that if I ever had power, I would use it to protect her bloodline, to find any Moonblessed who survived and keep them safe. He squeezed Rhiannon's hand gently. I became Alpha King at 18. I've spent 8 years building alliances, gathering strength, preparing for this. For you. The weight of those words settled over her like a cloak. He'd been preparing for her, waiting for her, building a kingdom strong enough to protect her before he even knew her name. No pressure, she said, trying for levity and falling short. He smiled, understanding the deflection for what it was. The only pressure is staying alive long enough to see what we can build together. On the third day, they crested a ridge, and Rhiannon saw Dark Moon territory for the first time. It stole her breath. Where Ashwood had been modest wooden structures and muddy paths, Dark Moon was a city carved from the mountains themselves. Obsidian towers rose from living rock, their surfaces polished to mirror brightness. Bridges arched between buildings made from some material that sparkled in the afternoon sun. Waterfalls cascaded through the city, their mist creating permanent rainbows that painted everything in ethereal light. Welcome home, Kale said softly. Home. The word resonated in her bones like a bell struck true. As they descended into the valley, wolves began appearing along the road. Not threatening, just curious. They lowered their heads respectfully as the convoy passed, but their eyes were on Rhiannon, assessing, wondering. A few of the older wolves stared at Morgan with something that looked like recognition, or memory, or both. The main gates were crafted from silver and obsidian, depicting the phases of the moon in relief so detailed it looked three-dimensional. They opened smoothly as the convoy approached, revealing a courtyard filled with hundreds of wolves in both forms. The moment Kale dismounted, the crowd erupted in welcome. Not formal bowing, not fearful submission, just genuine joy at their king's return. He helped Rhiannon down from her horse, his hands steady on her waist, and a hush fell over the courtyard. Every eye turned to her. She felt exposed suddenly, vulnerable. The broken Omega from Ashwood standing before wolves who looked like they'd never known shame. Then as one, the entire courtyard dropped to one knee. Rise, Kale commanded, his voice carrying easily across the space. This is Rhiannon Moonblessed, my mate, your future queen. She's been hidden, suppressed, abused by wolves who should have protected her. We will not repeat their mistakes. We will not make her feel less than what she is. We will honor her, protect her. And anyone who treats her with anything less than the respect she deserves will answer to me personally. A cheer erupted, loud enough to shake the obsidian towers. Rhiannon felt tears prick her eyes. These wolves didn't know her, didn't owe her anything, but they were celebrating her anyway, accepting her, welcoming her home. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, tall and broad-shouldered, with scars that spoke of decades in combat and eyes that held both warmth and assessment in equal measure. My queen, she said, bowing formally, I am Magnus, Beta of Dark Moon. Your chambers have been prepared in the Moon Tower. Unless, she glanced at Kale with barely concealed amusement, you prefer to share the king's chambers. Heat flooded Rhiannon's face. The Moon Tower sounds perfect. For now, Kale added quietly, making her blush deepen. Magnus led them through the fortress, and Rhiannon marveled at the architecture. Moonstone was embedded in every wall, glowing softly with captured light. Tapestries depicted wolf history, including several that showed silver wolves she now recognized as Moonblessed. Your pack honors them, she observed, the Moonblessed. The Dark Moon Pack was founded by a wolf saved by a Moonblessed healer, Magnus explained. We've never forgotten that debt. When the other packs voted to hunt Moonblessed, Dark Moon abstained. It caused a rift that still exists today. Is that why they hate Kale? Rhiannon asked. They don't hate him. They fear him. Magnus's smile was sharp. He's too powerful, too young, too unwilling to play their political games. And now that he's found you, he has even less reason to pretend their rules matter. They reached the Moon Tower, its spiral staircase lined with windows that caught the afternoon light. At the top, double doors opened into chambers that made Rhiannon's cottage look like a closet. The space was circular with a glass ceiling that would show the night sky. Bookshelves lined the walls filled with volumes that made her fingers itch to explore. A writing desk sat by a window overlooking the entire territory. The bed was massive, draped in silver and midnight blue. This is too much, Rhiannon breathed. This is exactly enough, Morgan said from behind them. The elderly woman moved to the bookshelves with the reverence of someone seeing old friends. Moon-blessed were always scholars, keepers of history and wisdom. You'll need these resources for what comes next. What comes next? Training. Magnus crossed her arms. You can shift now, which is good, but can you control it? Can you shift partially? Can you use your crystalline form for defense? Can you access the gifts that make Moon-blessed different from other wolves? Rhiannon sank into a chair, suddenly overwhelmed. I don't know how to do any of that. That's why you have us, Magnus said gently. I'll train your body. Morgan will train your mind. And Kale, she grinned, well, I'm sure he'll find ways to make himself useful. Over the next week, Rhiannon learned what it meant to be moon-blessed. Magnus was a relentless teacher. Each dawn, they trained in the courtyard while the pack watched, learning to control her shift, to go from human to wolf and back without the transition leaving her vulnerable, to shift partially keeping human hands with wolf, claws human mind with wolf senses. Your crystalline fur isn't just beautiful, Magnus explained during one session. It's armor. Normal fangs can't pierce it, normal claws slide off, but you need to learn to use it strategically. She demonstrated by attacking without warning. Rhiannon barely managed to shift in time, her wolf form appearing just as Magnus's blade would have found flesh. The weapon skittered off her crystalline coat, leaving not even a scratch. Good, Magnus said. Now do it faster. The attacks came again and again, teaching her body to react without thought, to trust her wolf's instincts, to move between forms like water-changing states. Afternoons belonged to Morgan. They spent hours in the library, and Rhiannon discovered that moon-blessed abilities went far beyond shifting. There were texts written in languages that made no sense until she let her wolf surface. Then the words rearranged themselves into perfect clarity. Our gifts are tied to truth, Morgan explained one afternoon. Truth-seeing is the most known, but there are others. We can walk on moonlight when the moon is full, phase through solid objects, hear the voices of our ancestors in meditation, access a collective memory that spans generations. How do I learn these things? Practice, patience, and trust. Morgan placed a hand over Rhiannon's heart. You have to believe you're worthy of this legacy. Can you do that? Rhiannon thought of the 21 years spent believing she was broken, defective, worthless. Could she undo that damage in a week, in a lifetime? I can try, she whispered. Trying is enough, for now. One afternoon, a messenger arrived. Not from the council, but from Ashwood. Magnus brought the sealed letter to Rhiannon during her training session. It's from your father, Magnus said carefully. You don't have to read it if you're not ready. Rhiannon took the letter, feeling the weight of it in her hands. Part of her wanted to throw it in the fire unread, but another part, the part that was learning to be curious instead of afraid, needed to know what Aldrich had to say. She broke the seal and read, Rhiannon, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it, but you deserve to know the truth. Your mother told me what the binding would cost. I knew. Every morning I watched her grow weaker, and I knew. I told myself she would change her mind, that she would choose to live instead of continuing to die for you. I was too much of a coward to ask her to stop, too afraid that if I forced the choice, she would choose you anyway and hate me for making her say it out loud. So I said nothing, did nothing. Let her sacrifice herself day by day while I pretended not to see. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to do better. To be the father I should have been 6 years ago, if you'll allow it. The council has summoned all Moon-blessed to appear for verification. I'll be traveling to the gathering as a witness, not because anyone asked me to, but because I won't hide anymore while you face danger. Your father, Aldrich Rhiannon, read the letter twice, then a third time. She could feel Magnus watching her, waiting to see if she needed support or space. He's coming to the council gathering, Rhiannon said finally. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. She folded the letter carefully. But at least he's trying. That evening, Kale found her on the battlements, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Magnus told me about the letter, he said, coming to stand beside her. I'm not ready to see him yet, Rhiannon admitted. But maybe at the council gathering. Maybe then. You don't owe him anything, Kale said gently. Not forgiveness, not a relationship, nothing. I know. She leaned against the stone wall. But I think I might want to. Not for him, for me. To close that chapter. To see if healing is possible. Kale's hand found hers. When this is over, when the council has acknowledged you, when you're safe, I want to court you properly. Flowers, poetry, long walks under the moon. All the things you missed while you were too busy surviving. She laughed. I don't need flowers. I know, but I need to give them to you anyway. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. You deserve to be courted, cherished, treated like you're precious instead of a problem. I've never been precious to anyone except grandmother and mother. Then it's time you learned what it feels like. On the 8th day during her afternoon session with Morgan, Rhiannon felt it, a presence, multiple presences, reaching out through the moonlight connection that all moon-blessed shared. Distant but growing stronger, like voices calling from very far away. Grandmother, she gasped, I feel there are others, other moon-blessed, they're waking up. Morgan's eyes blazed with triumph. Of course they are. Your awakening was like a beacon. Every suppressed, moon-blessed bloodline within 1,000 miles would have felt it. They're breaking free. How many? I don't know, but there were 8 of us, 8 grandmothers who formed a secret network to protect moon-blessed children. We scattered across different packs, different territories, hiding our granddaughters, just like I hid Freya, just like Freya hid you. Rhiannon's mind reeled. You've been coordinating this for 65 years. Someone had to. Morgan's smile was fierce. The council thought they'd won, thought they'd exterminated us. They never imagined that we'd go underground, that we'd hide our daughters and granddaughters in plain sight, waiting for the day when it would be safe to emerge. And that day is now. That day is now. The old woman stood moving to the window. Because you have something we never had. Protection. A mate who's an alpha king, an army, a territory strong enough to defend against the council. She turned back to Rhiannon, and there was such pride in her eyes it made Rhiannon's chest ache. You're not just my granddaughter anymore, child. You're hope. You're the proof that we survived. And when the others see that you're alive, protected, thriving, they'll find the courage to stop hiding too. 3 days later they came. The first was a young woman named Nova, 25 years old, with hair like spun moonlight. She'd traveled from the Eastern Territories with her grandmother, both of them exhausted and terrified, but determined. Nova's shift was breathtaking. Her wolf was pure silver, smaller than Rhiannon's, but no less magnificent. When she saw Rhiannon, she fell to her knees and wept. I thought I was alone, she sobbed. Grandmother told me stories, but I thought they were just dreams, just wishes. I never believed. You're not alone, Rhiannon said, helping her to her feet. Not anymore. The second was Astrid, 23, who appeared the next day with eyes that seemed to see beyond the physical world. Her wolf form looked like captured starlight, ethereal and otherworldly. I had a vision, she said upon arriving. Weeks ago, I saw you standing in a hall of wolves, your crystalline fur reflecting torchlight. I saw the mate bond snap into place. I saw everything changing. She smiled, and it was both joyful and sad. But I also saw darkness coming. Something that will test us all. The third was Zephyra, 22, whose wolf form looked like the northern lights given flesh. Greens and purples and blues, shifting across her coat in mesmerizing patterns. She was quiet, watchful, but when she smiled, it was like the sun breaking through clouds. My grandmother died last year, she said softly. The council found her, killed her trying to make her reveal where I was. But she never told. She died protecting me. Morgan pulled the young woman into a fierce embrace. Celeste, your grandmother was Celeste. We were friends 65 years ago. She was brave then and braver still when she died. You knew her. All 8 of us knew each other. We were the ones who survived the initial purge, who went into hiding, who formed the network. Morgan's voice cracked. Celeste was the first one we lost, but she didn't die for nothing. You're here. You're alive. That's what she wanted. The 4 young moon-blessed wolves sat together that evening, sharing stories, comparing abilities, marveling at the fact that they existed, that they'd survived, and that they'd found each other. There are more, Nova said. I can feel them, still hidden, still afraid. They'll come, Morgan assured her. Now that they know it's safe, they'll come. But safety, as it turned out, was an illusion. 2 days after Zephyra's arrival, a messenger came, official, bearing the seal of the Council of Alphas. Magnus brought the scroll to Kale during dinner. He read it, his expression darkening with every line. What is it? Rhiannon asked. The council invokes the ancient accords. His voice was tight with controlled fury. They're demanding that you appear before them within 2 weeks for heritage verification. All 4 Moonblessed must present themselves. If you refuse, they'll declare you rogue, which means any wolf in any territory can legally hunt you. It's a trap, Magnus said flatly. They want to get you all in one place, away from Darkmoon's protection, where they can finish what they started 65 years ago, Morgan finished. Yes, of course it's a trap, but we can't refuse. The ancient accords carry the weight of goddess law. If we violate them, every pack in the north will turn against us. Then we go prepared, Kale said. I'll bring the full force of Dark Moon's armies. They won't allow it. Astrid's voice was distant, her eyes unfocused in the way that meant she was seeing something beyond the present moment. The accords specify neutral ground. No armies, no guards beyond a single beta for each alpha present. You've seen this? Rhiannon asked. Fragments. Astrid blinked, returning to the present. I see us standing before the council. 7 thrones, 7 alphas. I see anger, fear. I see someone who recognizes Morrigan, someone old, someone who thought she was dead. Morrigan's face went pale. Dorian. It has to be Dorian. He was the one who led the hunt, who killed Thomas, who tried to kill me. He's still alive. Rhiannon's hands clenched into fists. Apparently. The old woman's voice was steady, but her eyes burned with ancient rage. He was 40 then, which would make him over 100 now. No wolf lives that long naturally. Unless he found a way to extend his life, Kale said grimly. There are dark rituals, blood magic, consuming the essence of other wolves to steal their years. The 3 packs that went silent in the east, Magnus said suddenly. The ones where every wolf vanished without a trace. What if he's been consuming them, Morrigan finished, building his power, preparing for the day when Moon Blessed might resurface. Silence fell over the table. Heavy, ominous. We could run, Nova said quietly. Hide again. It worked for 65 years. No. Rhiannon's voice was firm. She stood facing the 4 Moon Blessed and the King and the Beta. No more hiding, no more pretending to be small. We go to the council. We face them. And we show them that moon-blessed wolves aren't easy to kill anymore. Spoken like a queen, Kale said, pride clear in his voice. Not a queen yet, she met his eyes, but maybe soon. The 2 weeks before the council gathering passed in a blur of preparation. Magnus drilled them on combat formations. How the 4 moon-blessed could fight together, their different abilities complementing each other. Nova's speed, Astrid's prophetic sight, Zephyra's ability to create dazzling illusions with her shifting colors, Rhiannon's crystalline armor. You're strongest together, Magnus emphasized. Separately, you're powerful. Together, you're nearly unstoppable. Remember that. Morrigan taught them the old laws, the ancient protocols that govern council gatherings, the loopholes and technicalities that might save their lives if things went wrong. Dorian will try to trap you with words, she warned. He'll use the law as a weapon. You need to know it better than he does. Kale spent every evening with Rhiannon, and their relationship deepened from careful friendship into something more. Not quite lovers, not quite mates, but something profound and precious that grew stronger with each shared sunset. When this is over, he said one night, when the council has acknowledged you, when you're safe, I'm going to court you properly. Flowers, poetry, long walks under the moon, all the things you missed while you were too busy surviving. She laughed. You said that already. I know, but I mean it more each time I say it. His hand found hers in the darkness. You deserve to be courted, cherished, treated like you're precious instead of a problem. I've never been precious to anyone except grandmother and mother. Then it's time you learned what it feels like. On the night before they were to leave for the council gathering, Rhiannon couldn't sleep. She stood on her balcony watching the full moon rise over the mountains, feeling her wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin. A presence appeared beside her, Astrid, her starlight eyes distant. You're having a vision, Rhiannon said. It wasn't a question. Yes. The young prophet's voice was strained. I see the council. I see Dorian. But there's something else. Something I can't quite see clearly. A shadow. A betrayal. From who? That's what I can't see. The vision keeps fracturing, changing. But I know this, the threat isn't just the council, it's closer, someone in our circle. Someone we trust. Rhiannon's blood ran cold. Are you sure? No. Astrid's eyes focused, meeting Rhiannon's directly. That's what scares me. I'm never unsure about my visions. They're always clear, always certain. But this one, it's like something is blocking me from seeing the full truth. And that should be impossible. Unless whoever is betraying us knows how to hide from prophecy. Exactly. They stood in silence, watching the moon climb higher. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Then another and another, a chorus of voices rising to greet the night. Do we tell the others? Rhiannon asked. Not yet, not until I'm sure. Astrid's jaw tightened. But we need to be careful. Watch everyone. Trust no one completely. Not even Kale. The prophet's hesitation was answer enough. Rhiannon's chest tightened. The mate bond sang in her blood, insisting that Kale was trustworthy, that he would never betray her. But bonds could be faked, manipulated. She'd learned that lesson too well in Ashwood. "I'll be careful," she promised. The next morning they departed for the council grounds. The journey would take 2 days, and unlike their arrival at Dark Moon, this ride was tense, silent. Everyone felt the weight of what was coming. Kale rode beside her, his presence both comforting and, now thanks to Astrid's warning, slightly suspect. Rhiannon hated herself for the doubt, hated that she couldn't fully trust the one person who'd shown her nothing but protection. But survival meant being smart, and being smart meant questioning everything. On the second night, they made camp on neutral ground, a clearing that belonged to no pack, maintained by mutual agreement for exactly this purpose: gatherings, challenges, the places where pack politics played out on neutral stage. Morgan sat beside the fire, staring into flames that reflected in her ancient eyes. "You're thinking about Thomas," Rhiannon said, settling beside her. "Always," Morgan whispered. 65 years and I still hear his voice, still feel the echo of our bond, still wake up reaching for him in the dark." She wiped her eyes. "Do you know what the worst part is? I can't remember his face anymore. Not clearly, just impressions, the warmth of his smile, the steadiness in his eyes. But the details." She trailed off. "Tell me something about him I don't know," Rhiannon said gently. Morgan's face softened. "He couldn't sing at all, but he hummed constantly while he worked, these terrible off-key tunes that made everyone laugh. And when I was pregnant with Freya, he'd hum to my belly every night. The same song, an old blacksmith's working song." She smiled through her tears. Freya kicked every time she heard it, like she was keeping time. "That's beautiful. That's what I want for you. Not just a mate bond, not just biology and fate, but genuine love, the kind that makes you better, braver, more yourself." She looked at Rhiannon. "I see possibility with Kale, but whether that becomes love, that's for you to discover." That night, Rhiannon dreamed. She stood in a great hall filled with silver light. 7 thrones sat empty before her. But behind them in the shadows, something moved. Something old and dark and hungry. It spoke with a voice like breaking bones. "The silver moon rises. But moons can be eclipsed. Light can be swallowed. And moon-blessed wolves bleed just like any other." She woke, gasping, her wolf snarling with instinctive fear. Across the camp, Astrid sat up, her eyes glowing white with prophetic sight. "It's here," she whispered. "The darkness I couldn't see. It's already here, among us, waiting." And in the distance, something howled. Not a wolf, not exactly. Something that had once been wolf, but had become something else. Something wrong. The sound echoed through the night like a promise, like a threat, like the beginning of the end. Kale appeared at Rhiannon's side, his hand on her shoulder. "Did you hear that?" "We all heard it," Magnus said grimly. She was already armed, her blade reflecting moonlight. "Whatever that was, it wasn't natural." "It was a warning," Morgan said. She stood at the edge of the firelight, staring into the darkness beyond. "Dorian knows we're coming, and he's ready." "Then we better be ready too," Rhiannon said. She stood, her wolf rising to the surface, crystalline fur rippling across her skin before she forced it back down. "How long until we reach the council grounds?" "Dawn," Kale said. "We'll arrive at first light." "Good." She looked at each face around the fire. The 4 moon-blessed, the Alpha King, the loyal Beta, her grandmother who'd survived 65 years of hiding. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. No more hiding, no more fear. We are moon-blessed. We are the wolves who see truth, and truth is the most dangerous weapon of all." Nova stood, her silver eyes blazing. "Together." Astrid rose next. "Together." Zephyra followed. "Together." Morgan smiled, fierce and proud. "Together." Kale's hand found Rhiannon's, their fingers interlacing. "Together, until the end." But in the shadows beyond the firelight, something watched. Something waited. Something that knew secrets they hadn't discovered yet. Something that would change everything. The moon continued its arc across the sky, indifferent to the drama playing out beneath it. Wolves slept fitfully or didn't sleep at all. And in the deepest part of the night, when shadows were longest and doubt strongest, Rhiannon heard it again. That voice, that presence, the darkness Astrid couldn't quite see. It whispered in her mind like poison dripped into clear water. "You think you're special, think you're strong, but you're just a broken Omega playing at being queen. And when the council is done with you, when Dorian reveals what he knows, when the betrayal comes from where you least expect it, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that you were warned. She didn't tell anyone about the voice, didn't mention the creeping dread that had taken root in her chest. Because if Astrid was right, if there was a traitor among them, revealing her fears might be exactly what the enemy wanted. So she stayed silent, stayed watchful. And when dawn finally broke, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, she rode toward the council grounds with her head high and her wolf ready. Not knowing that the greatest danger wasn't waiting at the council grounds, it was riding beside her. The council grounds appeared on the horizon, a natural amphitheater carved into white stone. 7 thrones sat in a semicircle. 7 alphas would sit in judgment, and 4 moon-blessed wolves would stand before them, betting everything on the chance that truth still mattered in a world built on lies. Rhiannon took a deep breath, felt her wolf settle into watchful readiness. Whatever happens, she murmured to herself, we survive. That's what we do. We survive. But survival, she was about to learn, sometimes required sacrifice, and the price of truth was often paid in blood. The council was waiting, and so was the betrayal. The amphitheater was older than memory. White stone carved by hands that had turned to dust centuries ago. 7 thrones sat in judgment, each one occupied by an alpha whose power radiated like heat from banked coals. But it was the central throne that drew every eye. The alpha seated there looked 60 at most, his face unlined as hair, dark, his body strong. Only his eyes gave away the truth. They were ancient, empty, like windows into a void that had consumed everything human and left only hunger. Dorian. Morrigan's breath caught when she saw him. Rhiannon felt her grandmother's hand tighten on her arm nails, biting through fabric into skin. He looks exactly the same, Morrigan whispered. 65 years, and he hasn't aged a day. The 4 moon-blessed stood in the center of the amphitheater, exposed and vulnerable. Kale stood to the side with Magnus, the only guards allowed by ancient law. His silver eyes tracked every movement, every threat, but he couldn't intervene unless directly challenged. Rhiannon of Ashwood. Dorian's voice was smooth as poisoned honey. Or should I say Rhiannon Moon-blessed stepped forward. She moved into the light, her spine straight, her wolf settled into watchful calm beneath her skin. Behind her, Nova, Astrid, and Zephyra formed a silent wall of support. The council has invoked the ancient accords, Dorian continued, to verify your heritage, to determine if you are truly what you claim to be, or if this is some elaborate deception designed to destabilize pack order. I claim nothing, Rhiannon said, her voice carrying clearly across the stone. I am what I am, Moon-blessed, daughter of Freya Moon-blessed, granddaughter of Morrigan Moon-blessed, the bloodline you tried to exterminate. Gasps echoed around the amphitheater. The other 6 alphas shifted uncomfortably. One, a woman named Sana with intelligent eyes and silver-streaked hair, leaned forward with obvious interest. Morrigan, Sana's voice was sharp. Morrigan of the Silver Creek Pack, but she died 65 years ago. You were told lies. Morrigan stepped forward and, for the first time in 6 decades, she stood at her full height. No trembling, no stooped shoulders, no pretense of frailty. I survived Sana. I survived by becoming small, invisible, harmless, while you and the other packs forgot we existed. Dorian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dead eyes. Recognition, and beneath it, fear. Impossible, he said flatly. I killed you. I put my blade through your mate's heart and watched you run into the forest. No one survives the hunting grounds in winter. No one. Yet here I stand. Morrigan's smile was all teeth. Did you ever wonder, Dorian? Did you ever question whether we might have survived? Or were you too busy consuming the essence of murdered wolves to extend your unnatural life? The amphitheater erupted in chaos. Alphas shouting, wolves growling. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Silence. Dorian's command cracked like a whip. The noise died, but the tension remained coiled and dangerous. You dare accuse me, you who hid like a coward for 65 years? I hid like a survivor, Morrigan corrected. There's a difference. And yes, I accuse you. I accuse you of consuming wolf essences to extend your life, of murdering entire packs to steal their years, of becoming the very monster you claimed Moon-blessed would be. Prove it, Dorian sneered. You have no evidence, no witnesses, just the ravings of an old woman desperate to seem relevant. I have something better than evidence. Rhiannon stepped forward, her eyes beginning to glow with silver light. I have truth. She'd been practicing with Morrigan, learning to access the truth-seeing ability that was every Moon-blessed wolf's birthright. The power to look at someone and see not just what they showed the world, but what they truly were. Every crime, every secret, every lie written in their soul. Don't look at him directly, Astrid whispered urgently from behind her. I'm seeing there's something wrong with his eyes. Something that will trap you if you... But Rhiannon was already looking, already opening herself to the truth-seeing, already letting her power flow outward to touch Dorian's mind. She expected to see his crimes, his corruption, his century of murder. What she didn't expect was the trap. The moment her power touched his mind, it grabbed hold like a vice. Pain exploded through her skull as something dark and hungry tried to pull her consciousness into the void behind Dorian's eyes. She heard screaming her own voice, distant and broken as her wolf thrashed in panic. This wasn't just seeing truth. This was being devoured by lies so profound they'd become their own reality. Rhiannon. Kale's voice cut through the agony. She felt him trying to reach her, felt Magnus holding him back. Ancient law. He couldn't intervene. Couldn't save her. Foolish child. Dorian's voice was inside her head, now slithering through her thoughts like oil. Did you think I spent a century preparing for Moonblessed to return without learning how to defend against your gifts? Your truth-seeing is powerful, but I've consumed enough wolves to build walls around my mind that even you can't penetrate. She was drowning, suffocating, her vision tunneled to a single point of darkness that promised oblivion. Then another presence joined the battle. Morrigan, her grandmother's power flowing into Rhiannon like a river of moonlight, steadying her, anchoring her. Not alone, child, Morrigan's voice echoed in her mind. We're never alone. Two more presences joined, Nova and Zephyra adding their strength to the defense. And finally Astrid, her prophet's sight cutting through Dorian's deceptions like a blade through shadow. Together, the five Moonblessed pushed back, not trying to see truth anymore, just trying to survive, to break free from the trap that had nearly consumed Rhiannon. They tore loose with a psychic scream that shattered every piece of glass in the amphitheater. Rhiannon collapsed, gasping, her nose bleeding silver blood that glowed in the afternoon light. You see, Dorian spread his hands to the council, his expression mocking. They attack with forbidden mind magic. Prove themselves dangerous. Unstable. Exactly what we feared. That wasn't an attack. Sana stood, her voice cutting through the chaos. That was self-defense. You did something to her. I saw it. We all saw it. You saw a Moonblessed attempting to violate my mind, Dorian countered smoothly, using powers that were outlawed for exactly this reason. They cannot be trusted, cannot be controlled. They must be. Enough, a new voice rang out across the amphitheater. Strong, familiar, filled with a guilt so profound it had weight. Aldrich stood at the entrance, flanked by a dozen Ashwood wolves. Rhiannon's father looked like he'd aged 10 years in the 2 weeks since she'd left. His face was haggard, his eyes haunted, but his spine was straight. Father, Rhiannon's voice came out as a croak. I couldn't let you face this alone. Aldrich descended into the amphitheater, ignoring the protests about ancient law and neutral ground. Not again. I've failed you once, I won't fail you twice. Aldrich of Ashwood. Dorian's voice went cold. You violate sacred protocols by bringing armed wolves to a council gathering. I violate nothing. Aldrich stopped beside his daughter, and for the first time in 6 years, he looked at her with something other than shame. I invoke the right of testimony. As Rhiannon's father, I have knowledge relevant to this verification. The council must hear it. There is no right of, Dorian began, Ancient Accord Article 7, Section 3. Morgan interrupted, her voice ringing with authority. Any blood relative may offer testimony in heritage verification. It's old law, rarely used, but still valid. Sana nodded slowly. She's correct. The law stands. Speak, Aldrich of Ashwood. Rhiannon's father took a breath that seemed to come from the bottom of his soul. My mate Freya was Moonblessed. I knew this when I bonded with her. I knew the danger, the council's laws, the prohibition, but I loved her, and she said we could hide. That if she suppressed her wolf, if she lived small, we could have a life together. His voice cracked. We had 27 years. 27 years of lying to everyone, including ourselves. And then Rhiannon was born, and Freya knew immediately. Knew that our daughter had inherited the bloodline. Knew that she would be stronger than Freya had ever been. So she bound her, Dorian said dismissively. Used blood magic to suppress her daughter's wolf. Illegal magic. Forbidden magic. She used a mother's love. Aldrich's hands clenched into fists. She performed a binding ritual that would save Rhiannon's life. It required her to pour her own life force into our daughter day by day, year by year. She knew it would kill her. Knew she was choosing death. But she did it anyway because that's what mothers do. They sacrifice. Tears streamed down his face, now unchecked. I watched her fade. Watched her grow weaker. And I did nothing. I told myself she was just tired, that she'd recover, that if I ignored it, maybe it would stop being true. But it never stopped. And when she died, when Rhiannon's 18th birthday came and the shift went wrong, I couldn't look at my daughter without seeing my own cowardice reflected back. He turned to Rhiannon, his voice breaking completely. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. You needed a father, and all you got was a coward too wrapped up in his own guilt to see you were suffering too. Rhiannon's throat closed. She wanted to speak, to tell him it was fine, it didn't matter, she'd survived. But the words wouldn't come. This is very touching, Dorian said, his voice dripping with contempt. But it proves nothing except that Moonblessed continue to use forbidden magic, that they endanger their own children with their recklessness. This is exactly why they must be. Show them, Astrid said suddenly. The young prophet's eyes had gone white with vision. Show them what he really is, not through truth-seeing, through memory. I don't understand, Rhiannon said. Your blood. Astrid pointed to where Rhiannon's nose had bled silver. It's still on the ground. Moonblessed blood remembers. It holds echoes of truth that can't be corrupted or deceived. Use it. Rhiannon looked at her grandmother, who nodded slowly. I don't know if it will work. It's old magic, very old, but if Astrid sees it, it's worth trying. She knelt, placing her palm over the silver blood soaking into white stone. Her wolf rose to the surface, and she felt the connection snap into place. Her blood, her power, her truth. Show me, she whispered. Show me what Dorian really is. The amphitheater dissolved into vision. They stood in a forest clearing 65 years gone. Wolves surrounded a small village, torches burning, steel gleaming. And at the head of the hunting party stood Dorian, younger, but still recognizable. Burn it all, his voice commanded. Every building, every wolf who harbors moon-blessed sympathies. And bring me the survivors. The scene shifted. A dungeon. 3 moon-blessed wolves chained to walls, their crystalline fur dulled with blood and dirt. Dorian moved between them with a blade that looked more ritual than weapon. Your essence, he said conversationally, is the key to immortality. Every moon-blessed I consume adds years to my life, decades. Your power becomes my power. Your life becomes my life. He cut. The wolves screamed, and Dorian drank deeply, his body glowing with stolen light. The vision shifted again and again, decade after decade of murder, of consuming, of building power on the bones of those he'd sworn to protect. The final scene was recent. A small pack in the Eastern Territories gathered for a celebration. Dorian arrived with soldiers. Within an hour, every wolf was dead, every essence consumed, every trace of their existence erased except for shadow burns on the ground. The vision ended. The amphitheater snapped back into focus. Every wolf present stood in horrified silence, having witnessed Dorian's century of atrocities through Rhiannon's blood memory. This is fabrication, Dorian said, but his voice lacked conviction. Moon-blessed manipulation. We all saw it, Sana said quietly. Every alpha, every witness. We all saw what you've done. And now you see what I've become. Dorian stood, and the pretense of humanity dropped away completely. His eyes went black. His skin took on a grayish cast. Power rolled off him in waves that stank of death and corruption. Did you think I'd come unprepared, that I wouldn't know Moonblessed had survived? I've spent 65 years building power specifically for this moment. He shifted, but what emerged wasn't a wolf. It was something twisted, corrupted, a massive form of shadow and stolen essence with eyes like burning coals and a hunger that seemed bottomless. You want to restore Moonblessed to the world? His voice was layered, now echoing with the screams of every wolf he'd consumed. Let's see if you can survive the Shadow King first. He attacked. Magnus threw herself between Dorian and Rhiannon, her blade meeting shadow flesh with a sound like tearing metal. Kale shifted mid-leap, his massive black wolf form grappling with the corruption that Dorian had become. The 4 young Moonblessed scattered, trying to find defensive positions. But Dorian was too fast, too strong, enhanced by a century of consuming other wolves' essences. One of his shadow limbs caught Nova, sending her crashing into the amphitheater wall. She shifted mid-flight, her silver wolf form absorbing some of the impact, but she didn't rise. No. Rhiannon shifted, her crystalline form blazing with moonlight. She charged, but Dorian swatted her aside like she weighed nothing. Foolish child. Dorian's laugh was the sound of breaking bones. You're 21 years old, barely awakened. What hope do you have against me? Rhiannon's wolf form hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through her ribs. She tried to rise, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Is this the great moon-blessed restoration? Dorian circled her, slowly savoring his dominance. One broken Omega and a handful of untrained children. This is what I was afraid of. Not just children. Morgan's voice rang out across the amphitheater. Not just the young. The elderly woman stood at the edge of the arena, 87 years old, having spent 65 of those years hiding, trembling, pretending to be harmless. No more, Shaw. She shifted, and the transformation was like watching the moon itself take wolf form. Her crystalline coat blazed with silver light accumulated over nearly 9 decades. Her form was smaller than Rhiannon's, touched with the silver of age, but radiating a power that made the very air shimmer. You should have killed me, Dorian. Morgan's mental voice carried to everyone present. When you had the chance, when I was young and weak, you should have made sure. She attacked with speed that belied her age. Decades of hidden training, 65 years of preparing for this exact moment. Her claws found shadow flesh, and where they struck, moonlight burned through corruption. Dorian howled in pain and rage. Impossible, you're old, you should be weak. Age is not weakness. Morgan circled him like the predator she'd always been. It's accumulated strength, wisdom, experience. I've had 65 years to prepare for you, monster. Did you think I spent them cowering? The battle became chaos. Morgan and Dorian locked together silver moonlight against corrupted shadow. Kale rejoined the fight, his massive form tearing at Dorian's flanks. Magnus coordinated the other alphas, including Aldrich, who fought with desperate courage to protect his daughter. But Dorian was still winning. Every wolf he struck stayed down. Every injury he took healed almost instantly, powered by the essence of hundreds of consumed victims. Grandmother. Rhiannon struggled to her feet, her ribs screaming. You can't beat him alone. I don't intend to. But Morgan's voice carried absolute conviction. Rhiannon, remember what I taught you. Moon blessed are strongest together. 4 bloodlines, 4 powers, 1 constellation. Understanding crashed through Rhiannon like lightning. The training, the practice, the formation they'd rehearsed but never used in actual combat. Nova Astrid Zephyra. Rhiannon's mental call rang out. The constellation now. The 3 young moon-blessed dragged themselves upright, Nova bleeding, Astrid limping, Zephyra favoring one leg, but alive, still fighting. They formed a square around Dorian and Morgan. North, south, east, west, 4 points of silver light, and they began to sing. It wasn't a howl, wasn't anything so simple. It was harmony. 4 voices weaving together into something that transcended sound and became pure power. The moonlight didn't just shine on them, it shone through them. They became conduits for something ancient and vast and utterly uncompromising. Truth. The light washed over Dorian and he screamed, not in pain, in recognition. The stolen essences he'd consumed, the wolves he'd murdered, the power he'd built on bones, all of it was exposed under the moon-blessed light, and the truth of what he'd become burned him from the inside out. Stop, Dorian's form began to fracture, shadow peeling away to reveal what lay beneath. Please, I can change, I can show him, Rhiannon said, her voice layered with power. Show him who he was before corruption took him. The moonlight intensified, and in its glow they all saw it. The memory of who Dorian had been 115 years ago. A young alpha, idealistic, believing he was protecting his pack from genuine threats, making hard choices that seemed right at the time. The first moon-blessed he killed had been in legitimate self-defense. She'd attacked his pack. He'd responded. But then he'd tasted her essence, felt the power, felt his life extending beyond natural limits. And he'd wanted more. The second kill had been harder to justify. The third easier. By the 10th, he'd stopped trying to justify it all. The end justified the means. He was making the world safer. Wasn't he? Except he wasn't. He was just feeding an addiction that had grown until it consumed everything human in him. I didn't mean... Dorian's voice was different now. Younger. Almost recognizable as belonging to someone who'd once been good. I was trying to protect, I thought. I know, Rhiannon said, and she meant it. I know how it starts. One choice that seems right, then another. Then you're so far down the path, you can't remember what it looked like before it twisted. She shifted back to human form, standing naked and unashamed in the center of the constellation. The other moon-blessed held the formation, kept the light burning, but Rhiannon walked forward until she stood directly before the monster Dorian had become. You can stop, she said softly. You can choose differently. It's not too late. It's been too late for 100 years, Dorian whispered. The wolves I consumed, their voices never stopped. Their screams, I hear them every moment, every breath. How do I live with that? By making what time you have left count for something. She placed her hand on what passed for his chest. By using your power to help instead of harm. By spending whatever years the goddess grants you trying to balance the scales. Impossible, I'm a monster. You're a wolf who made terrible choices. Rhiannon's eyes blazed silver. But you're still a wolf. Somewhere under all this corruption, you're still the alpha who thought he was protecting his pack. Find him. Be him again. The moonlight pulsed, and slowly and possibly Dorian's shadow form began to change. The corruption didn't disappear. It couldn't, not after a century of accumulation, but it pulled back. Condensed, contained, what remained was an old wolf, ancient, scarred, carrying the weight of uncountable crimes. But recognizably wolf again. Recognizably alive instead of undead. He collapsed to the stone, gasping, weeping. What have I done? Oh, goddess, what have I done? Nothing that can't be balanced, Morgan said. She'd shifted back to human form, standing tall despite her 87 years. But it will take the rest of your life, however long that is. I deserve death, Dorian whispered. Death is easy, Rhiannon said. Living with what you've done, working to make amends, facing every dawn, knowing you can never fully repay the debt, that's the hard path. That's the path that actually means something. She turned to face the council alphas who'd watched the entire battle in stunned silence. This is what moon-blessed wolves do, she said, her voice carrying across the amphitheater. We don't just see truth. We offer the chance to choose truth, to turn away from corruption, to become better than what you were. Ishasana stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. You could have killed him. Should have, by any reasonable measure. Why didn't you? Because killing him would have made us exactly what you feared. Rhiannon met each alpha's eyes in turn. Dangerous, uncontrollable, willing to execute judgment without mercy. We're not executioners. We're mirrors. We show you what you are, and then we let you choose what to do about it. Silence fell over the council grounds. A silence that felt like the entire world holding its breath. Then Sana did something unprecedented. She stepped down from her throne, walked to where Rhiannon stood, and knelt. I vote to reinstate moon-blessed wolves as legitimate members of Wolf Society, she said clearly, with full rights, full protections, and representation on the council. That's insane, one of the other alphas sputtered. You saw what they can do. They're too powerful. No, Sana said, standing. They're exactly powerful enough. Powerful enough to expose corruption. Powerful enough to defend themselves. But not so drunk on power that they kill when they could heal. She looked at Rhiannon with something like admiration. That's the kind of power I want in the world. The kind that offers mercy even to monsters. I second the vote, Aldrich said. Rhiannon's father stepped forward, his voice steady despite the tears still drying on his face. Moon-blessed wolves have existed in secret for 65 years, causing no harm, threatening no one. They only emerged because it became safe to do so. If we deny them now, we prove we haven't learned anything from our history. Third, said another alpha, then another. Within minutes, 6 of the 7 council members had voted to reinstate Moonblessed. Only Dorian remained collapsed on the stone, his vote the deciding factor. Why do you hesitate? Sana asked him. Dorian looked at Rhiannon with eyes that held a century of regret. Because I don't deserve to make this choice. I murdered them, hunted them. How can I vote to restore what I tried to destroy? Because you're still alive, Rhiannon said gently. Because you still have choices to make. Choose this one right. He closed his eyes, took a shaking breath. I vote yes, moon-blessed or reinstated, with every protection we can offer, and his voice broke, I volunteer to face judgment for my crimes, whatever penalty the council deems appropriate. The penalty, Sana said slowly, is this. You will dedicate the remainder of your life to protecting moon-blessed wolves. You will use your power, and yes, you may keep it, because forcibly removing it would kill you to defend those you once hunted. And you will serve as living proof that even the worst corruption can be turned toward redemption. I accept, Dorian whispered. The council session officially ended with the formation of a new governing structure. 7 alphas, 4 moon-blessed representatives, and delegates from Beta Gamma Delta and Omega designations. A circle instead of a hierarchy, each voice equal, each perspective valued. Rhiannon was offered the title of Moon-blessed Queen. She refused. I don't need a crown, she said firmly. I spent 21 years believing I was nothing. Now I know my worth. I don't need a throne to use my voice. Then what title would you accept? Sana asked. First counselor. Rhiannon looked at her fellow moon-blessed, at her grandmother, at Kale standing proud beside her. A counselor serves, listens, facilitates. That's what I want to be. Not above anyone, beside them. The title was granted by unanimous vote. As the official ceremonies concluded and wolves began to disperse, Rhiannon found herself face to face with her father. I meant what I said in my letter, Aldrich began, about wanting to do better, to be the father I should have been. I know, Rhiannon's voice was steady. And I meant what I said in Ashwood. I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It just means we can move forward. I don't expect us to be close, he said quietly. I don't even know if that's possible after everything. But maybe we could write to each other, occasionally, small steps. Small steps, she agreed, and for the first time in 6 years they embraced. Brief, awkward, but genuine. In the chaos of packing up after the council gathering, Rhiannon noticed 3 small forms huddled together near the edge of the amphitheater. Children. The aftermath of battle always left orphans, but these 3 looked particularly lost. She approached slowly, not wanting to startle them. Up close she could see they were young, maybe 7, 8, and 9 years old. A girl with wide, dark eyes. A boy with serious features. Another girl whose hair caught the sunlight like copper. Are you hurt? Rhiannon asked gently. The oldest, the boy, shook his head. Our pack was destroyed last month by shadow wolves. We've been hiding, moving between territories, trying to survive. Rhiannon's chest tightened. Dorian's corruption had spread farther than they'd known. Do you have family? Anyone who could take you in? 3 heads shook in unison. She looked back at Kyle, who'd been watching from a distance. He met her eyes and nodded slightly. Permission, agreement, understanding. Would you like to come with us? Rhiannon asked. To Darkmoon territory. We can't replace what you've lost, but we can offer you a home, safety, a chance to heal. The oldest girl, the one with copper hair, looked at her with eyes too old for her age. Why would you help us? We're nobody. So was I, Rhiannon said softly. Once upon a time, and someone helped me anyway. That evening, as preparations were made for the journey back to Darkmoon, Kale found Rhiannon watching the sunset. 3 children, he said, coming to stand beside her. Is that all right? She asked. I should have asked you first, but when I saw them, you saw yourself. He took her hand, and you chose to be the person you needed when you were alone. That's exactly who I want you to be. I'm not ready to be a mother, she admitted. Good thing they need a safe place to grow more than they need a perfect parent. He squeezed her hand. We'll figure it out together. Together, she echoed. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the light fade from the sky. I still want to court you properly, Kale said after a while. When we get home, if you're ready. I think I might be, Rhiannon said. She turned to face him fully. I've spent this whole journey discovering who I am, what I want, and one of the things I want is you. Not because fate says so, but because you've shown me what partnership looks like, what it means to choose someone every day. His eyes blazed silver in the dying light. Then let me court you. Let me show you what it means to be cherished. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, let me mark you, make this bond permanent, make you mine as I'm already yours. Not yet, she said, but soon. Let me have this time, learning to be first counselor, helping those children heal, building this new world we've created. And then, she smiled, then yes, absolutely yes. He pulled her close, and for a long moment they just held each other. 2 people who'd survived impossible things, found each other against all odds, built something precious from pain. The moon rose over the council grounds, full and bright and approving, and somewhere in the distance, wolves began to howl, a chorus of voices rising to greet the night, old and young, alpha and omega, moon-blessed and ordinary wolves all singing together. The world was changing, and Rhiannon stood at the center of it, no longer broken, no longer hidden, no longer afraid. Just herself, finally completely herself. The silver moon had risen, and it would never set again.